You know, right. Nick Durst here with Joe Calabrese. And Joe, I know you are excited because as a fellow Italian-American, we have a former Italian-American Entertainer of the Year. You may have seen him in the Maserati going down the Columbus Day Parade in Morristown, New Jersey, or maybe you saw his band rocking out in Bellport, Long Island back in the day, the very talented guy. And I don't want to give anything away. Joe, I know you want to say some words about this guy before you bring him on.
As far as I'm concerned, we have a semi-local Italian-American hero on our show, a guy who understands us really, really well. We got that distant cousin thing. We got the Staten Island, Long Island thing going on. We got somebody who's very, very popular here in the local New York market. He's the host or co-host of Boomer and Gio in the mornings on WFAN, and you can see the simulcast on CBS Sports Network. We're really, really excited to have him on. We're in the process of completing our tour of WFAN. We're almost done. So we would like to welcome on Mr. Gregg Giannotti. Welcome, Greg. How are you doing today? Fine. It's a really nice Saturday morning, actually, but what's going on?
Oh, it's my pleasure, Nick and Joe, and I see that you've been chopping through everybody at Entercom New York. There's still some names you got to get to. I hope that I can live up to the standards of some of these other guys. I know Brandon Tierney was a home run. I know that Jerry Recca was also very, very good for you guys, but I'm hoping I can live up to that standard. So it's exciting to be here. It's 2021. Can't wait to get the show started again on January 4th. We're all back together. So it's a great day. What do you guys got for me?
So Gio, we heard that one time somebody at WFN, they saw you got a paper cut and you were just bleeding straight olive oil, just pure Italian olive oil coming out. Now, we're coming to the end of eating season here, which, as you have said, is from Halloween straight through New Year's Day. I think we've all packed on the pounds, especially considering we were quarantining beforehand. What's the goal here for everybody here with the 2021 is supposed to be the make yourself number one, but I don't know how we're gonna turn things around here after all this eating.
Yeah, I mean it is tough. I mean, I am a fluctuator, and unfortunately, everybody can see it on television on CBS Sports Network. It's great to be on TV. Don't get me wrong; I wouldn't want it any other way. But I have different versions of myself. I'm like that squirrel that if you see in the summer looks really skinny and fit, and then when you see him getting ready for packing the nuts in the trees, you just be fat as hell. So yeah, it's tough. I actually have said that eating season can go all the way through Super Bowl Sunday. I can't have it go all the way through Super Bowl Sunday. I think I probably gained 20 pounds from August till now. So I got to start going back. It's just what you do. I mean, the mindset is the toughest thing. It's once you decide all right, enough is enough, whether it's getting on the scale or it's just the way that you feel. But for me, I can't deny myself of those things, especially in the holidays, summertime, then into fall, and then into the holidays. I have to eat and drink. If I didn't have those things, I would be a less happy person. So to me, especially now we're all cooped up, for the good of the mental health, I'm going to eat and drink some stuff. But you're right, that does have to stop. But you guys don't look like you have any problems with that. I mean, freaking Nick's got to weigh 125 pounds for Christ's sake.
I wish.
Yes,
I'm not right now. I'm tipping the scales at 157.
Oh wow, Jesus Christ! That's like my left leg is 157 pounds. So good for you,
Gio. I need your opinion here because Nick and I definitively have the answer for you, but we need confirmation. What is the best eating holiday of the year, and why is it Christmas Eve?
Yeah, I mean, Christmas Eve is absolutely tremendous. I mean, the only thing about Christmas Eve that is tough is also, Christmas the next day, I'm eating as well. So it's there are times that I stop myself on Christmas Eve because I know Christmas is also going to be a complete and utter eating disaster. So, I mean, Thanksgiving, I mean, I really do enjoy Thanksgiving. I don't know if you guys have had this debate or whatever. I mean, I'm still a turkey guy. I'm still a stuffing guy. I'm still a pie guy. But as far as Italians go, I mean, Christmas Eve is it. I mean, it always will be. But I will say there have been times the last couple of years because I know that Christmas is also going to be a feast where I've said, I got to stop it right here because I also want to gorge myself tomorrow, where that doesn't normally happen on Thanksgiving.
Yeah, and with Christmas, then you got New Year's right after it. So it's just 4 eating days in 10 days. And, speaking of New Year's, I'm spending New Year's Eve at my wife's uncle's house. And I told him, I said, we're having Gregg Giannotti on. He goes, you got to ask him this because I always try to call in. I never get through. He wants to know, where did the nickname Gio come from? Your last name's Giannotti. Shouldn't it be Gia?
Yeah, I've heard a lot of that. So it's something that just happened in high school. So in high school in baseball, I give myself that name. People just started calling me Gio. And it was funny. Once I told my parents that back in high school, I was like, people call me Gio on the baseball and football team. My dad said that back in high school, his friends also had called him Gio. I don't know. Some people, Giannotti, people think it is. It's not. It sort of stuck. And it got to the point where, when we were coming up with the name of the show and trying to think, Boomer and what, Boomer and Greg sounded a little bit too much like Boomer and Craig, Giannotti and Boomer seemed a little cumbersome. So I was like, listen, everybody around here calls me Gio. Let's just do it that way. And if I have to explain it a little bit, I'll explain it. But it is confusing to people. The 2 G's in my first name is confusing to people. It's a weird one, but quite frankly, when you have a longer last name like that, and it's masculinized. That's a word as well. Gio over Gia. If it was Boomer and Gia, you would expect some like beautiful Italian woman to be sitting next to him. Instead, you got me. So I think that it works out pretty well.
Yeah, I think it's one of the better nicknames at WFAN. Maybe even a Mount Rushmore. You got Moose. Of course, you got Mad Dog. So yeah, it works out. And speaking of Mount Rushmore's here, you're no stranger to arguments within the building. So yeah, obviously had you and Carlin, you and Mike, BT and Mike in your time at WFAN. So at your time as an intern and then producing, and then when you come back later on and back in the building, what would you say are the Mount Rushmores of arguments you've seen?
Well, the biggest one for sure was the end of Mike and the Mad Dog. And what was great about that was I was one of the few people to see it. So the way that the schedule worked was, this is when I was producing for Joe and Evan in the midday. So the way the schedule worked, there was a stretch there where the only people in the newsroom were me and the update anchor, who was John Minko at the time. So Mike and Chris used to get in these epic arguments off the air. And it was only me and Minko that would see it in the newsroom. So I feel like I was privy to some of the great screaming matches between those guys of all time. So there was one time where Dog was just ripping Mike for not being up on the NBA or not watching as much as he used to. And I remember he kept going out of the studio, then going back into the studio to scream, then going back out of the studio. And he would kick the door open every time that he would go back in. So, like, he came out, he'd be screaming at him. The door would shut. He would fill up a glass of water. He'd go back to the door. He'd kick the studio door open, then start screaming at him some more, then come out. And then Minko just sat there in silence. I sat there in silence. And then after that big blow up, they didn't speak off the air for like 4 or 5 months. It had to have been. And one of my favorite things that I used to see was, it was funny to me, was Mike would leave during the breaks. He'd do whatever he would do. And then Dog would stay in the studio for the most part. And Mike would wait outside the studio door to see the on-air light go on before he went in. So to create no awkward, off-the-air conversation, he would then come in after Dog started the segment. If you ever used to watch on Yes, you would always see Mike walking in late to the segments. And he was doing that intentionally because he didn't want to have any interaction with Dog off the air. But yet, still on the air, they were great together. The chemistry was still there. So that was a big one. There's the public ones that everybody knows, right? Craig and Mike, and then I have it behind me, actually, the New York Post cover of me and Mike. I've got that framed up there. I've got that. Those are the public ones. But like the off the air stuff, people knew Mike and Chris, didn't like one another there at the end. But as far as like the behind the scenes ones, there's not as many. Mike and Chernoff, there were a couple of really good ones there too, where he would scream it in and they'd go back and forth, and it was ugly. But generally it involves Mike. I got to be honest with you. I wish I could tell you there was something like more like behind the scenes, but most of these arguments would involve him, and it was really no surprise.
Yeah, it seems like there's a rite of passage here where whoever comes into that building, they have to at least cross paths with Mike in a not so pleasant way before you ultimately earn his respect. So Nick and I always ask this to the fan guys who come on. Were you more of a Mike guy or were you more of a Mad Dog guy?
So before I got there, I was just a fan of the show, and I never really separated them because I just loved the show. So then I got there, and basically what happens when you get there is one of them would choose you. Like, you didn't have a choice. So, and we talked about this on our show not that long ago, where you would walk in the building, either Mike or Chris would choose you out in the newsroom to be one of their guys. And Dog just happened to choose me for whatever reason, liked me. We talked, we had a good relationship. And then whatever, if you were in that Mad Dog camp, then Mike didn't like you. And if you were in the Mike camp, then Dog would be weary of you. I mean, Dog wasn't as holding grudges or anything like that. But so when I was in the building, I was more of a Dog guy. Dog's also a guy like I've called for advice. I remember when I was out in Pittsburgh, I would call him. There was a couple times during contract negotiations I would go over and talk to him and see what was available over there, whatever, stuff like that. So, I mean, I'm a Dog guy. And then also, if you listen to Dog solo shows, I mean, his craft and the way that he does it, to me, is spectacular. I mean, his skill set is still to this day, he's as sharp as he's ever been. So I've always had a lot of respect for that.
Yeah, and he could back up his talk. I love him on High Heat on LB Network. We had on Greg Amsinger, one of the faces of LB Network, and he said, one day Mad Dog was just talking so much crap about someone's fielding, so we put him out there on the field. We were hitting him line drives as hard as we can. He's barehanding balls, throwing them left and right. So if he's gonna take a dig at somebody, he's gonna back it up with the way he taught with his actions too.
Sure, no, absolutely, and he's a guy that doesn't necessarily care about how he looks doing certain things. He's not all that concerned about his image. He doesn't take himself too seriously. So those are other things that you gotta respect about the guy.
No doubt about it. So you mentioned you started there as an intern in 2005. Eddie Scazzeri ran the internship program. I know firsthand as I was an intern as well. And then after that, like so many guys do, you're able to start working there part-time, cutting tape, and probably became a board operator. But in 2007, you become full-time. And then 2008, I believe, you become the producer for Joe and Evan. How did that opportunity come about? Obviously, the show is just in its early stages then. And what was the process like to interview with Joe?
And so, there wasn't actually, I didn't really have an interview with Joe and Evan at all. It was sort of just like they gave their blessing of the candidates, and then Spitz and Chernoff, Eric Spitz and Mark Chernoff, they decided. Now, it came open because Ray Martell, who had produced Joe for years, he had just gotten married. He wasn't making enough money. I mean, as a producer of a sports talk show, especially at that time, I think my first job as a board op 4 to midnight Wednesday through Sunday was my first full-time job at FAN. That paid $26,000. And then I got promoted to do that midday job, and I think it was $31,000. So, you come to a point where it's like, okay, can I continue to do this? Ray had gotten married. He said, I kind of can't. He wanted to start a family. So he went to go work for his father-in-law's insurance agency, and I stepped up and was able to get there. And it was really important for me like that. Like, I had worked with Steve Summers at night, and Steve allowed me to be on the air and do voices and do whatever I wanted to do. And that got me a little bit of attention with the decision makers over there. But what really changed everything was getting that midday job, because I was there during the hours that the important people were there. I was working with Joe and Evan. I saw Mike and Chris. I saw Spitz and Chernoff every single day. So instead of being a name on a schedule who they might have heard a clip of at night, I became a face and a body and a personality, and I was in front of them all the time. So, that job, and it was tough because any like those big shows, when you're producing those big shows, it's stressful as hell, but it was totally worth it. And it only ended up being 2 years.
Yeah. So
yeah.
No, of course.
So no, go ahead.